The following is a presentation of the ForceCenter podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the ForceCenter podcast feed, and this particular episode of the ForceCenter podcast feed is a deep dive. It's an episode where we really look under the hood of whatever Star Wars car we're looking at. A strange metaphor I did not expect myself to say, but there I did. We're going to be looking under the hood of the High Republic book written by Claudia Gray, Into the Dark. I'm very excited to do that. Also, I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Ken Knapsack. I'm bad with cars, but I love looking inside the hoods of Star Wars books. A lot of fun today. Into the Dark. I got a lot of Post-it notes. Whether or not to get to those Post-it notes doesn't matter, but I have a lot of them. Going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm glad that you posted it up. I took a lot of photos of the pages, which I do when there's a good quote. And oh man, too many photos. My phone is very, very full. I'll need to look under the hood of that as well.
So off air, maybe you and I compare notes. I sometimes feel a little behind on the books because I don't get to really read them twice. Like I do a Clone Wars episode where I watch it 4 times before I talk about it. And I try to make a note on the iPhone, which disrupts my rhythm of reading. So sometimes I'm like, I'll come back and make a note. Then I fail to make the note. But you're taking pictures. That's smart.
I get torn between stopping. I do stop a lot to write notes and questions of like, ooh, how are they going to address this? So I remember that's a question. But then sometimes just like, I cannot be bothered to write down that long quote I like. So then I take a quick photo. And then I kick myself later when I have to transcribe it. Anyway, that's a little bit too under our hood. So let's stop saying under the hood, and let's start talking about this book. We want to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. There are so many Star Wars books to choose from, but since we're talking about a book today, we're going to recommend that one. If you want to listen to the audiobook of Into the Dark by Claudia Gray, you can download your free audiobook today. Go to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audiobook. Pause this episode, listen to all of Into the Dark, take notes however you want, and then come back and finish this podcast. But Ken, we have another offer, right?
Yeah, when you're done listening to this podcast and have all those notes, give yourself the joy of another Star Wars book, because we are proud to say that Inside Editions, publisher of a ton of great Star Wars books, is offering 35% off across their website with a special ForceCenter code. To get your discount, enter the coupon code FC35 or visit the website with this link, insighteditions.com/discount/FC35. This week, we're recommending the Inside Editions book, Star Wars Galactic Baking, which is coming out May 4th. Oh, a lot of cool things to cook inspired by the Star Wars galaxy. So check it all out and check out with the code FC35.
Excellent. I am looking forward to getting into that galactic baking. And if I try to make any of the dishes, that will be an absolute horror show. So maybe I'll make a fun TikTok of me just destroying some Cloud City marshmallows. So look forward to that. Check that out, FC35, and of course, audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. But for now, let's get into the Dark. We always like to let people know this is full spoilers. As many spoilers as possible. Often we talk about the last part of the book first, so full spoilers. But let's start with Ken. Ken, with a big picture reaction. What is your big picture reaction to this book? Did you love it, like it, struggle with it? What was it?
I love it, and I also love that on this particular outline, there's some of your notes jotted down, and I almost just started reading your notes, like almost because I was like, oh wait, I didn't write that. This is great. So overall, it's Star Wars High Republic, Into the Dark. Big fan of this. Big fan of what's going on in the High Republic. No secret there, and not surprised that I wouldn't love a Claudia Gray book. Master and Apprentice was great. It didn't hit me as well as the other 3, but she's still just absolutely one of my favorite Star Wars writers, because in Master and Apprentice, some of the stuff she focused on, the themes, the way she handles the Force, the actual actions of the Force. We're going to talk about later. That's one of the things she does just low key better than almost anything, other than just a great storyteller and such a quick read. And the reason I know I really love this is I got behind on reading this. You and I knew we were going to be covering this about 2 weeks out, so I started reading it because I wanted to get ahead and and make good notes. And then I just couldn't get to it. A lot going on in all of our lives, and I couldn't get to it. And I was worried about finishing it, meaning I was going to have to do a big sit down on one day and read 300 pages. It was looking like that. Then I picked it up again, and I just couldn't put it down. It moves so fast. I know this is sometimes in the YA genre, which are less words for Ken to stumble on. That's how I also say it. But it was just so fun. It is a fun genre crossing adventure. It was ominous at times and very philosophical. I'm not lying when I say this keeps in line with a lot of Claudia Gray's books. Bloodline and Master and Apprentice do come to mind. Of the Post-it notes I have, I just might need to refer to them later on for life reasons, not Star Wars reasons. Like, let me get the philosophy on attachment. Let me get the philosophy on action. That's one of the things I really loved about this as well.
Oh, I'm right there with you. That there was a moment toward the end of the book where Reith, the I would say main character, although there are a lot of characters, remembers something his master Jorah told him, and I I wanted to like lean into the book and like, Reith, could you say some other things that Jorah told you, because that one was real helpful to me today here in the real world. It's a lot of great philosophy that really does bring out that idea that, sometimes there's canon consistency in what the Jedi believe, and then really reminding you that, this whole Star Wars thing that Lucas started is, if you want it to be, a way to reflect on your own life in our world and wrestle with who you want to be when you grow up, no matter how old you are. And definitely a lot of that. For me, we've been reading a lot of Star Wars books. It's the third of the High Republic books, plus some comics. So I was really curious to see like how it would line up, not ranking, but like how would it fit in with the others. And big fan, obviously, of Claudia Gray, and I just loved the vibe of the book, the mood of the book. Delivered lots of things that I was interested in this High Republic era, but it really set itself apart for me of just the mood, that it was a combination of a haunted house story, except for it's a space station haunted by evil plants. It's a little bit of a murder mystery, not quite like straightforward. One person died, but there's a lot of the first half of the book is a lot of like, who did what to who and when and why is this happening? So it has a little bit of that appeal of all of these questions being raised, and you know that you're going to get most of those answers, and they're probably going to turn things upside down for the character. So it has that mood, that a little bit of that dread. Obviously, the introduction of the Drenger or Drenger. I don't know how we're saying that one, but since there appears to be disagreement about Marchian or Markion, I think I'll just say Drenger however I want. But they're to me, they are like a kind of body horror. Tap into that fear of of primal, of plants are alive, but they are different than us. And then, a lot of stories that have featured plant creatures, the sort of the body horror of what if I turn into one of them, and what it'd be like if your limbs were creeping vines. So there's that mood to it. And then there's so much in this book about old things that might come back to life. And there's so much knowledge that can come from that, but so much fear that can come from that. That this is, our characters are lost in a world of idols and smuggler's code and memories that they want to repress or not deal with. The Drenger themselves literally coming back to life. So I loved that overall vibe of spooky, just to put a word to it. This is spooky within Star Wars. And the darkness, obviously the book is called Into the Dark, so that's not a revelation, right? But when you read that, the word dark in Star Wars, sometimes like, cool, the dark side. And this absolutely deals with the literal, there is a dark side of the Force, and Jedi have to wrestle with that. But this book is also so much about death and fear and doubting loved ones, and darkness comes into this book in many, many forms. It's not just, will one of the Jedi fall to the dark side,
Oh yeah.
I think the two other big things for me, and my overall loved it. The High Republic keeps giving me new Jedi characters where I'm like, okay, well, this is great. Now, this is my favorite one. And could I please just have 18 books about this Jedi? Uh,
Hmm.
but Reith Silas was huge for me.
Yeah.
I felt a huge emotional connection to Reith Silas. This idea of this character who is not naturally gifted at the Force, or at least feels like he isn't. So he
Right.
tries to compensate by studying hard. Um, he craves knowledge and doesn't want adventure because he just loves reading and homework and being prepared, and thinks that you can take care of everything in life if you're prepared. And uh, I finished actually taking all of my copious notes on this
Mm.
book, and then last night, as I was talking to my wife about it, she's like, well, so how was that book after all? And I started describing how much I
Mhm.
liked Reith, and I was realizing, oh, I just prepared for this book review about Reith Silas like I was Reith Silas.
I love that we know each other enough now that I was like, this has got to have got Joseph's interest because he's a spectacular character. But a lot of what was there, so happy to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely personal connection, but also just in the ongoing adventure of what the High Republic is. Like, to
Mhm.
me, I feel like one of the big missions, one of the things I was excited for, and I'm excited that it's panning out, is different Jedi who are really, really individuals, who are not in lockstep with one another, who approach things and perceive things in a
Mhm.
really different way and are complete whole characters. And I just thought this was a great take of like, of course, there's going to be some young, studious Jedi who don't crave adventure and or are a little frightened of adventure and just want to stay in those hallowed halls with the comfort of knowledge surrounding them.
Yeah.
It's just a great take on the Jedi. Final big picture thing for me, which I was really curious about your take on. I felt like there were bits and pieces of uh, definitely comedy
Mhm.
in this book, but almost a little bit of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy flavored comedy. Leox got a little bit of Zaphod Beeblebrox energy to me, of just like,
Mhm.
he's this loose, fun guy with beads.
Yep.
A little bit of a 70s, hey, whatever, man, kind of vibe to him. And then
Yeah.
just obviously the character of Geode, a
Mhm.
mysterious rock creature, has been like literally the day that this book came out, somebody just tweeted Geode at me, who had
Yeah.
clearly dived into the book and was excited to share. And I was like, okay, I don't know who that is yet. Uh,
I don't collect geodes. Thank you.
but clearly a fan favorite,
Mhm.
but definitely a ton of comedy, a really different perspective on that kind of continual funny joke of, it was obvious what Jihad felt without giving us, the audience, any sort of way that we could feel that. There's a little meta to it.
Yeah.
Very, very much felt Hitchhiker's influenced. And when I got into that, I don't think he's meant to be a comedy character, but I feel like there is a little bit of Arthur Dent in Reith, in
Yeah.
his, I have to go out into the galaxy and encounter stuff that I'd prefer just being back at home doing my basics.
Uh, 100%. Yeah, no, I love that you made this a comparison. I think it's absolutely there. As someone who, I don't cosplay much in my life, but the only times I've really done it is either as Pee Wee Herman or Arthur Dent. So love Hitchhikers. I've talked about it often here on the show, but yeah, no, because the comedy's there. Leox kind of being, as Claudia Gray said, like Matthew McConaughey in space, definitely goes to Zaphod, especially to Sam Rockwell's version. And what I think is an underrated version of the story, the 2005 film, that's definitely there. Aretha's Arthur's a very wise. Aretha's even a little, I don't know, Bilbo in the Hobbit films is portrayed by Martin Freeman, who, all by the way, is also Arthur Dent in the movie. Tection. And I just think we should talk about Geode now. I don't want to bury the lead.
Yeah.
Geode is one of my favorite things in years in Star Wars. And there's apparently some conversation around Geode that's not all positive. I'm not plugged into that side of the world. I'm okay with that. But here, I'll say this for me, and you and I, we come from comedy. We study comedy. We've talked about comedy philosophy and everything. Geode, when it first, I saw some of the photos. Someone tweeted a photo or something before, like it was like a rock. And they put it on a figure back, and I'm sure Brian Ward will do a better version one day. But and I was like, oh, so is there a character in this book that's a rock? And so when he's introduced, and I kind of clicked in, I was like, oh, okay, because it no secret, puns aren't comedy. Puns are a party trick. And not saying that this was a pun, but it's just like, it's a rock and his name's Geode. And I'm like, okay. The execution of that concept, which is a wild, crazy, silly concept, the execution of it, the way anytime a character interacts with Geode, it is so smart. It is the opposite of lazy. It is so smart and so just well done when it flows into Geode, and Geode's non-response that says everything makes so much sense. And every one of them is just a well-crafted bit, but it's not all comedy as we get to the end of the story with him. I just absolutely adored it. I loved the big risk taken of it. And as you and I love Claude in Rise of Skywalker. He's got no arms. How does he fix the Falcon? I don't know. It's Claude. There's a depth to it. And page 33, there's a great description. Geode said nothing and did nothing, which is how all of his responses seem to go. But really, they say everything. And I just loved it. So I'll end my rant on Ken, when it comes down to the great Geode debate, sides pro Geode.
That is 2 votes in the camp of pro Geode, and I love the way you're framing this discussion about what makes Geode work. Really makes Geode work for me. I thought of the Claude connection as well. I think that is a little bit of a tradition in Star Wars. If it's fun to have fun with the characters who are really, really different, and sometimes like on screen it can be a silly. Like Claude is fun because he's a little silly. You go back to somebody like Ifant Mana, like, wow, that's really different, and it's almost silly, and that's what makes it fun. But then how do you translate that to a book is really fascinating, because there's a version of this for me where it doesn't work. And I think that version is where the comedy is played to emphasize the silliness of it. And if you don't approach it from a place of it can be silly, but it also still has to have meaning, then it just becomes about the author. Then it becomes this exercise that takes you out of the book, and it becomes a game of how silly can I make Star Wars? Look what I did. I put a rock in it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have limbs to my knowledge. We don't know how it emotes. We don't know how it moves. We don't know how it touches the actual controls to do the things that it allegedly does. It could just be that, and it would be this silly joke that's like, we've set up a game of how silly can a Star Wars character be. Here's my entry in the game. It's a rock. Get sillier than that. To me, that is not what this character is. What this character is, on a like big symbolic level, is using the power of the written word of a book that doesn't have the visual clues of something on screen to force the reader to accept the same thing that the characters are going through, that there are some things that they can't have the answer to. When you think of like what Reith is going through, of like, I can research everything, I can write everything down, and he goes through this journey of having to accept there's some things where you're not going to be able to get the answer until you dive in, and even then you might have to live with doubt. And Geode makes us, the reader, do that, but in a really, really fun and interesting way. We have to accept that we can't quite understand what Geode is, and the comedy around him becomes really complex because we get the fun of doubting the other characters a little bit.
Yeah.
Like when when another character looks at Geode and is like, Geode said nothing, but it was clear that he agreed with me. You're invited to have that sense of humor about the joke is, are they right? And it allows you to doubt the other characters. It's a game that is very much about doubt and accepting what we don't know, rather than a game of just where is the silly dial? I turned it to 12.
Yeah, look, because some one of the greatest bits in it is is Geode going off to the club when they're back in Coruscant. And of course, because that's hilarious. And that was really funny and well played. But that's earned, the comedy of that is earned by how serious the story takes Geode, by the way. It's not, Geode's not a joke to anyone there. So everyone's interaction with him is pretty poignant and pretty purposeful and pretty powerful. And I love it saying, there's a reflection on the character. Every beat, silence is golden, but every look of Geode says something, says a purpose. There's a little bit of, at times, I don't have all the examples in front of me here, but I see Geode kind of represents maybe the truth or the right path or what to do. Geode is a rock. Geode is solid. Geode kind of knows how to handle it. And there's I don't know why I'm drawing a conclusion to this, but in the 2001 Ocean's 11, it's a soundbite a lot of people use, but Clooney and Pitt, and Clooney's like, all right, we have 11. Is that enough? We need one more? Yeah, right. We need one more. And Brad Pitt never moves. Brad Pitt never talks to him. Brad Pitt eats. And I see Geode as some of that, all these characters going, what should I do? Is that right? Did I make the decision? And they look at Geode. Geode has the answer because you know the answer. And you see it in Geode's face, which is a rock. And there's a lot of moments like that work for me too. I hope that ties into what you're saying about the doubt too, of just we are questioning the elements of the story, and Geode's there to let us know the right way forward, or hopefully you can find the right way forward. So therefore it's very serious and perhaps the most silliest thing in Star Wars.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there is almost, without making it literal wordplay, there is wordplay there to the character of he's a rock. He's there for people. He's got a little bit of R2 energy of he's the person that you can bounce something off of and realize what you actually think, because maybe you're putting it on Geode,
Mm-hmm. Oh, R2 and Geode party.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as you were hinting at, I think all of that works because Geode does take a big concrete, super important concrete. I didn't even mean that. A big, solid, a solid action. He takes a solid action when he blocks Wreath from flying out to space.
It's just, to you and I, puns are poison in our mouth.
Well, especially when you didn't mean to make them,
Yeah, just want to spit them out.
I'm trying to say this without making a pun, but I can't find a way. I'm so glad that you just brought Geode into the conversation, because Geode demands to be addressed. He is literally not an elephant in the room, but a rock in the middle of the room who needs to be addressed. I love him.
It's like, Geode, are you a main character of the story? Geode's look told me everything I needed to know.
Exactly. Geode is now going to be the Star Wars character that I answer when people are like, who from the Star Wars galaxy would you like to have on a podcast as a guest? Geode. Confirm what I already think. Let's talk about the other big introduction in this book, the Drenger. How do you choose to say it?
I think I say Drengir, but also, it's those videos. They've got great videos from Star Wars YouTube, kind of explaining the characters and giving you a little minute and a half kind of visual too. It really works for me. But they've said Marchion, and Charles Soule says Marchion. So they say Drengir. I'm going to say Drengir.
Nice. Let's just go for it. Whatever we say is fine. How did you feel about this introduction to this other big new villain?
I think I've kept a secret to myself more than anything. And I'm thinking, when we talked about it on the show before, we always try to spin things in a if not a positive direction, but of hey, let me just see what's coming and engage with what's presented to me. It's something that's big to us. This is an example. On paper, the idea to me, similar to Geode, the idea of plant-like villains that, are they a species? Are they plants? Are they sentient? I've seen comparisons to Little Shop of Horrors or something, Feed Me Seymour, all those kind of things. I don't know if that would have worked for me. I was a little dubious going in. I was worried about it, but something happened to me, because you get right away, you get to, whether you kind of had a sense this was the book they were coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not even spoilers. You just got a sense, and some of the promotional stuff and everything. You're like, okay, it's this book. It's this book. The moment they go to that station, the space station that you and I, now know was the one featured in the Kylo Ren comic, with Snoke and his hair on that planet, on that little space station. A dread came over me, and suddenly they, without even having yet to meet them, I don't know, they represented something, like you said, ancient, something dark, and we didn't at the beginning of the book. You don't fully know, But then I realized it was probably going to work more than I thought it would for me. And in the hands of Claudia Gray, I thought it was handled really well. Are they over the top? Yes. Like Geode, I think they're very over the top. But there's a mysterious menacing to them, and there's something so different about them. And they represent, you always bring up so well of organic versus mechanical in Star Wars and da, da, da. Well, here you got the Jedi fighting something so organic, but representing darkness, representing something dangerous and different. So it worked. Could they work on the big screen? I'm not sure yet. From my point of view, I'm not sure yet. Big talk and plan on the big screen. I don't know. If Claude worked in Rise of Skywalker for me, maybe this will work. But they were very effective here to help with the darkness tones and the big themes behind that. So at the end of the day, I come down positive on the side.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad that the horrible, terrifying plant monsters won you over and weren't too silly for you.
Yeah. No. Again, do I think they're over the top in a way? Yeah, the big meat and all this. Yeah, sure. But guess what? Have you seen Star Wars?
Yeah, I think for me, I love them because they were what I wanted them to be. And I think sometimes we talk a lot about like, don't let your expectations, poison how you see what was actually in front of you. And then sometimes I think you get the reward of you're thinking like, ooh, is this where they're going? And then they do. And that's great too. And one of the joys of speculating. I love that they are a different approach to the dark side, right? That we've mostly spent time in Star Wars with people who approach the dark side as the Sith or the Night Sisters, who are really self-aware characters who are a part of the dark side for them is their philosophy or their trickery or their, big long-term goals. We're even getting that, as a villain with Marchion Ro. These characters are the dark side just as hunger and anger, just as something primal. So for me, they really work on that big picture. What is their symbolism? Why are they here? They're an ancient thing that doesn't even think the other characters are sentient. They're just not even sentient. It doesn't really matter that they're not even considering like, should we form an alliance with them? How do we manipulate them? They're just like, you don't matter. I'm going to eat you. And I don't want to talk about it. Even to the point where they're clearly listening to Reith because they want information, but they don't acknowledge him. They're just hunger and anger that thinks anything less than them is meat to be eaten.
I loved, and that might have been something I really just started to really get one over. And again, the dread from the beginning, me being afraid of plant creatures yet to see, I've yet to see is a indication that I liked them. But I love when Reith is like telling them things and they're reacting to Reith by not even acknowledging him. It was pretty powerful for me. It was frustrating in a way. It's like, so Reith couldn't, there was no negotiation to happen, right? There was nothing could stop him. And I love it. And this might be breaking it down to almost maybe too literal, but like, I love that for a large portion of the book, they represent a darkness that, you touch up a little bit, but a darkness that none of our characters could see. A darkness that they did not know how to face because they did not know how to see it. They did not know what they were interacting with. It's plants.
Yeah.
And I love that, to break it down to that level, so to fit into the theme of this book, into the dark, and the idea of sometimes the darkness is, within us, but in the sense of just like, you might be thinking you're fighting one thing, but really this is where this is at. And there was something about that I connected to as well.
Yeah, and I think they work really well for our characters' journeys. Reith in particular, who needs to accept that knowledge is valuable, but sometimes you need to learn that through experience. They were such a great representation of that the Jedi did fare better against them as they did some learning on the job and noticed more about them. So there certainly was a validation of knowledge, but there was also this acceptance that there's no the history on these characters for now is unknown. It's lost. And if you want to learn more about the Drenger, you have to let them try to eat you and find a way to not actually be consumed by their horrific maws in whatever way that they're going to do that. The other thing I want to touch on with the Drenger for me, since you brought it up, is are they too over the top? Are they too pulpy? Are they too B movie? For me, they are this perfect point where Star Wars and Doctor Who overlap. That Star Wars and Doctor Who, and for Doctor Who, a part of it is that in the classic series in particular, they had a limited budget and a huge imagination, and they just
Yeah.
tried to make things happen. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't, and sometimes it was silly. But in both Doctor Who and Star Wars, I love the energy of the unapologetic. Yes, we love adventure serials. Yes, we love pulp stories. We love things that are over the top in such a way. That's a part of the joy of it. And the Drenger are so embracing that to me. Um, and it can become a conversation where you want Star Wars to be cool. You just
Yeah.
want it to be Vader in his cool armor with his red blade, and you can embrace the coolness of it. And then there's parts of Star Wars that pull you back and go like, no man, it's space wizards in robes, and
Mhm.
they visit planets that only have one season.
Yeah.
And almost anything that you can encounter could be a big creature with a mouth trying to eat you. It's fantasy. It's dragons. It's all this weirdness. And I love that the Drenger are just we are not holding back. They are an expression of the love of the B movie pulp fantasy side of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's funny when you brought up hitchhikers. Like, there's like a whole planet of unused mattresses, discarded mattresses in the hitchhiker's world. And that's one of my favorite things. So for there to be a rock and some killer plants, not only is it just George Lucas is probably like, yeah, that's what I wanted Star Wars to be. But like it's like a planet of sentient plants that just want to open up an industrial complex that would destroy them, but they're not aware. Like I could see Arthur and Ford running into them. And so there's something about it again. Yeah, again, when I say it's over the top, I stand behind. Yeah, it is over the top, and that's part of this adventure, part of this journey, and it's a, um, and that's someone who I love watching the rebellion against the Empire, and I love ships fighting, and I love Imperial officers scowling. I love all that, and that's kind of what I lean to sometimes. But yeah, I'm with you. It's fun to also remember there was a giant slug and his little monkey lizard pet and a hole in the ground, and that's also what pulled me in as a kid too.
Yeah, exactly. And movies like Rogue One will kind of lean a little bit more toward it's all practical. We got the
Yeah,
blasters, all that in ships, and then sometimes you just go all the way into the random Sarlacc mouth and of
yeah.
pulp. And I think the Drenger do, and I love it.
Or
So
sometimes you just yell "Bor Gullet," and then there you go. You're fixed.
exactly, you just get your little bit of Borgullet. That's your little bit of utterly unexplained weirdness, and
Uh,
the strange implication that Saw Gerrera is communing with
right.
the Borgullet for some reason. Anyway, a
Anyway,
different podcast. So this is our third High Republic book, plus several comic book issues. Did this book still feel like an intro to the era, or did it feel like we were moving on from introduction into
yeah.
something different?
Great question. Great question. I wrote a real strong, very just decided sorta in my notes. Um, yes, in theory, it's still an intro, but this definitely felt like its own story. Just like I felt the Test of Courage. A Test of Courage was its own story. But they're definitely connected. But this one, I almost feel you could have read this one first instead of Light of the Jedi. I still wouldn't suggest that, but because to me this is the point of the story, right? The characters are experiencing the effects of an incident they don't fully understand yet. The Great Disaster, the Nile, they don't fully understand it. The space station itself, they don't fully understand. The Drengir, Reith is like they came from their home world, or I think that was their home world. I don't know. It's all mystery. It's literally going into the dark in so many ways. So you almost could read this. It's like a cold open or something. You're like, what's going on? And then you pull out to the bigger picture of the light of the Jedi. So that way, this one felt less like a straight ahead intro, but it's still part of it. So that's why I say sorta. Light of the Jedi was the outline, and we're just playing in the moments of that outline now.
Yeah, and I think I agree with all that, and I think Light of the Jedi is so much like this big introduction where the characters do have to wrestle with who are the Nile, what is the Great Disaster, let's handle the big things, and then a
Mhm.
Test of Courage is a great, I just think, youthful perspective on that of
Mhm.
what's it going to be like for younger people to go through this turbulent time, but then there was something a little bit different about this. I think it was because it is almost this great balance to Light of the Jedi, where it was wrestling with the like, yeah, and there's some things we're not going to be able to figure out, and some things are going to be even more horrible than we imagined. It also just felt like it was really adding something because of introducing the Drenger and
Yeah.
and what they represent. So I think that made it feel to me like, yeah, we're still in this first round of stories where all stories end up at the Starlight Beacon, but
Mhm.
this one felt like it was taking a different route to get there. And I also think I was really impacted, and it worked well to be, reading this book, liking Reith Silas right away, being reintroduced to Jorah Molly, and remembering how much I like her, and then realizing when in this book is Reith going to find out what I know, that his master is dead,
Mhm.
and died quickly and horribly.
Mm. Yeah, no, yeah, there was some. It's effective. It's effective. That's why obviously Legend is a great place to start because it's really effective. And can you separate these all from? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You need to be able to read these books at first by accident and still not feel lost. But that was really effective with everything. When you're kind of like you have those answers and you can't give them to them just on a bookworm sitting on a couch reading a book on a Saturday. You're yelling, Reith, here's the story, and you can't. That was really effective.
Yeah, I thought so. I felt
Mhm.
bad for poor Reith and myself because I really like Jorah. uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's just our overview. We had to talk about Geode. We had to talk about Drenger.
Mhm.
But let's get into what we feel like are the big ideas, the themes of this book. I try to write them out and capture what I think is going on, so then we
Mhm.
can dig into the different aspects that spoke to us. I thought for me, it's really straightforward with the title Into the Dark, that this book really was about characters going through dark trials. Obviously,
Yeah.
any good story, the characters go through conflicts, but these were things where they were sort of being plunged into the dark, literal dark worlds, and uh, sort of the dark places of their soul. And in particular, this idea of discovering something they didn't know within that darkness. And that is, again, both philosophical in this book and really powerfully literal
Mhm.
within the plot. So a couple of kind of beats that support this view, and then we can dive in. Love on page 26, a great spin on just a young adult book that we've been spending time with Reith. He is not happy about going to the frontier. He looks at all the other older characters, particularly the Jedi, and thinks, well, when I am a full Jedi, not a Padawan, I'll be confident like everybody else. And then we go into their minds and realize they're all full of anxieties, and they will
Ah,
also be going into the dark. Is just a great way to kick it off. Of this
uh-huh.
isn't just this one young adult Reith Silas's journey into the dark. This is all of these characters.
Mhm.
So then, of course, we follow Reith facing unwanted change, trying to figure out what adventure is versus the comfort of study and knowledge. He has to cope with the death of Jorah Molly. We learn that Comac Vitus has to face this desire he has to embrace loss, to be allowed to mourn, to maybe even be angry, in contrast to what the Jedi Order teaches. We learn that Orla Drani has this desire to follow her instinctual connection to the Force, even when that goes against Jedi teachings. We learn that Dez Raiden is facing his selfish desire for adventure, and how that can kind of dabble with the dark side, and finding the balance that his master Jorah tried to teach him. We learned that Affy, the young woman who is the daughter of the owner of the Bine Guild and the co-pilot of the vessel, the vessel called the Vessel. We
Mhm.
learn that she is facing this horror of realizing that her adoptive mother indentured and partially caused the death of her biological parents. And then a big picture thing for me, Ken, I
Mhm.
really kind of wrestled with as I was reading this book and enjoying everything, going like, what is the structure? What's the story? What are we doing here? And to me, it all snaps utterly into place in the middle of the book when all of our characters have the
Mhm.
revelation that something that spoke to their journey, some hidden horror, is what was truly on the station. The
Mhm.
Nile, the Drenger, and the evidence of the Bine Guild's crimes. They all have that great. We have to go back into the darkness because we
Mhm.
realize what was really haunting us there. And that's to me when the book like just utterly snapped into place.
It's so funny because I noted that in a little more detail a little bit later on, and some of the themes we got planned to discuss here. But it's all connected. That was a great moment. It is. You can make the jokes about we must go back to the island, but it's so powerful, and that's I was really, dare I say, excited that they had to go face their demons, literally, maybe.
Yeah, and it tracks so well with these discussions about knowledge versus adventure. Like they
Mhm.
had just enough knowledge to know they had to go back and have the adventure of facing these horrors. So overall, for you, I want to hear your thoughts on this general theme of dark trials and discoveries. Was that an effective overall idea for you in this book?
Yeah, yeah, it was, and I think I have what I'm calling a micro focus version of what this theme is. I'd almost and not that you intended this to be the way of the themes, but I'd flip it in conversation to say discoveries that could potentially lead to dark trials.
Hmm.
And here's where I really focused on. A lot of this book is the student. I'm saying the general term, just student, younger person, whatever you want to say. Seeing their teachers, their mentors, at times they're leaders, you could even say, but seeing their teachers in different lights. And it's not just as simple to me, they were wrong and now I'm right. It isn't that. It's to me, this is again, this is a YA book. It's an analysis of growing up, becoming yourself, learning what you truly take from your upbringing. We talked about recently in Clone Wars of just sometimes you can challenge yourself, grow, change, and completely go a different direction, which is good. Or sometimes you can confirm in a way what you feel, and maybe it's a different way, and maybe it's your own version of it. And on page, you mentioned page 26, you got the Wreath stuff. You got this great stuff with Orla. I'm taking a little bit of the quote, breaking it up a little bit, but she says, "Go back to the origins of it all. Then you'll know whether you made the right decision." And I see a lot of the discoveries in this book of characters going back to some of the origins of their big points in life, and wondering and challenging themselves on, did I make the right decision? And some make different decisions, some confirm themselves, and they grow and all those kind of things. So these are discoveries that, to me, you can only confirm those discoveries after you go through a little trial with it, I think. And I'm not just doing a play on words, but and I love that because every one of these characters you mentioned has to question themselves just as much as their teachers, and I connected with that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to frame what this book is about. That unlike what we were talking about with Geode being a rock, literally and metaphorically, that everybody lost whatever or was in risk of losing whatever grounded them. You know, whatever they could cling to, whether it be like the literal death of a master, or with Affy, the betrayal of a parent, with Orla and Comac, the order not working for them, the order not giving them what they need. You know, with Wreath, I think it's the literal loss of Jorah, but it's also the loss of Coruscant and the comfort of being pre-prepared for everything because you can study for everything. But all of them, to me, go to the heart of what you're talking about, of that feeling of I've got this far in life because I could have this to cling to, whether it's a set of
Mm.
rules or a person or my worldview. And now just something's eating it away from the inside, and I have to figure out how to move forward.
Yeah, and that it's okay to move forward, that it's okay to change, or it's okay. I think we got the two main Jedi here, Comac and Orla, go through shared trauma, shared things, and they end up in different spots, right? But it's both right for them. Similar to you and I again, we're talking about the deserter. I'm not gonna, it's not directly connected to that Clone Wars episode, but that same type of thing. This book deals with that. It has some harsh questioning of the Jedi Order, which is part of what I'm interested to see the High Republic continue to do, but it doesn't throw it all out into the fire. It asks tough questions, and in doing that, it's I related to a little bit of it with Wreath, just who, to me, and this is a little bit to your follow up question of the particular character's trials or discoveries. I love that he starts this book out, the story out, as a certain view of himself, and when that he loses all of that, he discovers that he who he is can line up with what he feels he can't be, which is the dashing, adventurous Jedi. And there's a lot of lessons about adventure and Jedi craving that. But you know what I mean? Like Dez is kind of a poster child, and I don't know if Wreath feels that his way is the wrong way in a way. You know, he feels a little scared too. But I like at the end of the day, all who he is makes him that kind of Jedi as well, if that makes sense. And he discovers that through these trials too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love the way the script gets flipped on that. Of he doesn't perceive it in these critical moments. He just does what he needs to do. There are moments where he perceives it as adventure and doesn't like it, which I get great
Yeah.
comedy and great character development for that. But you know, he doesn't. He's not thinking about how can I, Reith Silas, rescue Des Ryden, the superior Padawan to my master, who all of my friends and contemporaries think is a rock star. All that is out the window, and he's just rescuing him because it's what
Yeah.
he's supposed to do. You know,
Right.
I really love that. Shows Reith's growth.
Yeah, there's a great line on page 9. Adventure is usually a euphemism for going to places that have lots of bugs. I'm with you, Reith.
Yeah, I think for me, I think part of the reason all these dark trials and discoveries and the loss of the foundation of knowledge that we're talking about are really powerful to me because the High Republic is dealing with this idea of let's go out to the frontier. And
Mhm.
Reith is really literal about it, of like, I have to go out to places I can't pre-study for.
Mm.
But that's just a great way. This is a great way to take that era, that idea of the Jedi are trying to bring their light out into a place that they don't know as well and internalize that. Everything
Mhm.
is about, without being too cute about it, like people are going into the dark frontiers of their soul, and it makes us feel that fear of going into the unknown really, really well. So I think that's why this idea really, really resonated with me, is because it was a great way to internalize the fear that's going to be present in the High Republic era for the Jedi.
Yeah, which is that question, right? What do the Jedi fear? That's what they were trying to answer with this series, and a lot in here to play with.
A lot to be afraid of. And did you relate to any other particular character's trial or discovery, or were you most drawn to Reith? Who were you drawn to?
Geode. No, there's a lot there with Leox. I do like it. And, he's again the Matthew McConaughey type. All right. He's someone who maybe has a little bit more knowledge of what quote the world actually is, but he's trying to. He's not. He's not no longer trying to protect Affy. Trying to grow into. He's trying to be part of it. Trying to change. There's a lot about him I liked. I did like whether or not I was completely drawn to him as a character. Comac Vitus is just a great. There's a lot in there about between him and Orla. So it's funny. I'm changing. I might be a little bit more with Orla. There's a lot about her and Instinct and some stuff I pulled that I relate to a lot. I am sometimes not the opposite of Reith. I mean, from working with me over the years, it's like I have to really be like, oh, let's just press record and go. Versus and that sometimes I'll talk myself into a corner, despite years of broadcasting, and I lean on, I got years of broadcasting experience. Let's just go, and I have to fight against that nature. Whereas Reith's kind of almost the other direction. So Orla has a little bit of this really going into your instincts and listen to your instincts and letting those instincts guide you, while also being being who you are. So anyways, I'm getting down my own personal life journey and why I'm kicking my butt a little bit more these days on with podcasting. But so I'll connect with that. Comac, what I was trying to go with Comac is the attachment stuff and the anger and the openness and acknowledging of all the emotions. It opens up these wonderful conversations about balance, and the book has a ton about that. And that is something I think in real life too. I am a big believer, someone who's fought in battle depression for years, of acknowledging it, and sometimes knowing that it's going to win the day. And when you even acknowledge that, it makes tomorrow better sometimes, and not being afraid of it, not dance. Sometimes you need to dance with the devil by the pale moonlight to know what it is. And I don't necessarily feel that suddenly means a Jedi can turn to the dark side of the Force and be okay. It doesn't change my core beliefs in Jedi philosophy, but he asks some really good questions in this book that I don't even know all the answers to. I just love that they've been asked.
Yeah, I think Comac's stuff and Orla's stuff is both really powerful for me personally. That question of whether to follow instincts or or listen to sort of like the teachings, even when your instincts are like, but I should go over here. When to do that, that's really powerful for me. I think in life, it is a balance between knowledge and instinct. And I think particularly in art, there are a million rules about what you should and shouldn't do in writing, what you should and shouldn't do in good podcasting, but then a lot of times the beauty is when you stop listening to the rules and just follow your gut. So there's a lot of power there. The Comac stuff is really powerful for me, almost canon wise. It goes back to the great discussions we've had about the way Yoda handles Anakin's questions in Revenge of the Sith. That to me, the core of what Yoda is saying is coming from a good place of like, we know this is how people fall to the dark side. We know you need to get to that place of peace. But there's a part of me of like, if Comac could have talked to Anakin, I think he could have helped him more, because it's not one size fits all. And Anakin's passionate, and he needs to, like you're saying, sometimes I needed to, just say, hey, I'm sorry to my wife, and say, I just need to be upset today, and then tomorrow I'll be better. And it almost like that's some Comac's argument of like, how much anger and grief can I let in and still be safe? I don't really know, because nobody's let me. And would that have made a difference to somebody like Anakin if somebody like Comac had said, it's okay, let the grief in, rage, I know the Jedi tell you not to, but punch a wall. And if you continue to feel that way, then we're in trouble. But embrace it and see if that's what you need. That stuff's all really intriguing to me.
Oh yeah, a lot of it there.
Yeah. I won't go on and on about Wreath, because we'll have plenty of other opportunities in our review. But I liked so much that there was comedy and depth from his journey. I pulled a couple quotes. This one is from page 149. He's worrying about keeping control over the station and the idols. And he says about some of the pirate types on the station, but if they stole one of the ancient idols, they'd just sell it for the precious metals or jewels without even bothering to study it. Sacrilege. This is some great comedy. I have worked for historical societies. I think preservation and study is really important, so that really spoke to me in both a comedy way and a sincere way. The other quote for me that was kind of the other end of Wreath's journey is when he is in the pod and he doesn't yet know where it's heading. He says, this is very, very bad. This is what happens when you don't have access to research materials. Which is, again, a great joke, but it gets to the heart of adventure versus comfort, or, learning by reading versus learning by doing, a thing that we all have to find balance in, of accepting that there are some things you can prepare for, and there are great moments where he has victory because he's studied the Amaxine culture and he can figure out how the controls work because he did the homework. And then there are other moments where like something is happening to you that you can't study for. There are things you can't study for. And I think that speaks to me, because I think it speaks to my own personality divide. But I also just think it's a duality that I don't think we talk about as much, this push-pull between adventure versus comfort of, there's the joy of experiencing what of, sitting on a couch with a loved one and watching a favorite TV show for the 5th time. We crave that, but then we also crave pushing ourselves to the limit, going someplace we've never done and doing something we haven't done before. And I think it's really important to recognize that both of those instincts are there. Both of those instincts are valid. And how do we balance them?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with there on that one there too. Instinct, preparation, the balance of it.
Yeah. How much of the podcast do we write down ahead of time? And how much do we wing? Let's move on to another big idea. And that to me is just the power of stories themselves and the ancient. It comes up again in the book. This idea that Wreath loves archives and he's great at study. Comac is a folklorist. He's got that great quote I didn't actually write down about that he wants to hear the darker fables that people have, not the stories where they turn themselves into heroes, but the darker ones where they're wrestling with something they can't speak about.
Right.
You've got just the ancient text on the idols. You have the secret smugglers' codes on the station that Affy is trying to decode. Even in that flashback to Orla and Comac's adventure on the moon, there's the cave painting of snakes that they don't pay attention to, and then they get attacked by a giant serpent. You got the Sith shrine underneath the Jedi temples. You got Reith, reading old fables about the Amaxine warriors. The Amaxine station and the Drendar themselves are old threats coming back to life. You got this ultimate conclusion from Reith that adventures are necessary to write new stories. So he kind of comes full circle of like, oh, that if I learn new things, I can write them down. So some kid like me sometime can go, good, somebody wrote this down. But there's so much there that is about the power of the ancient and the power of the written word. What are your feelings on that? What do you think that inherent fascination with old stories half forgotten? What's that about to you?
It's amazing to study what was, and it's fascinating to deal with it in this quote old story that's 200 years before like the era that we all grew up with. Like so, it's like that era is studying this era, which is studying another one there. I love looking back, the idea of any kind of warnings, any kind of history repeating itself, and can you study societies and learn a better way to handle things now. I'm a student of history, and that also means you uncover hard truths and how do you deal with that, and you can't go back and change what was, but you are here now, and what can you learn from that, and how does it all matter, and how history is to me is living. It is this living. We are in it now, and I love these characters in these stories. I think studying it's always the potential of like Dr. Afra going around and looking in the past. Sometimes I wish they dig even more into her archaeology side, and so we can uncover a lot of things and see how it applies to Star Wars now. So there's something just it's fascinating again to see these characters of old times look even beyond to the older times in Star Wars. I love the use of it.
Yeah, yeah. I love everything you're saying. For me, I think this is one of the central parts of Star Wars that I've always loved. I think that, I think of Obi-Wan. That's not a name. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. And that little mysterious thrill or trill, in the music that's right there. It's always to me been a part of Star Wars, that this idea that there is always a past to be discovered that could at any moment explode into the present. Something that you thought was long buried, long forgotten, might explode into the present. There's something dreamlike about it. Like I've only heard a little bit of this, or I've only read a little bit of this, but I think it's real, and I think it might matter. I think it taps into this feeling that I think humans have that is almost intuitive, that can be supplemented through actually studying history. This idea that we've been here for a long time, and we're luminous beings that have connections to long ago events, and it really it strangely centers you in the present, because you're reflecting on the fact that you are vaguely attached to mysterious things from long ago, and they might reemerge at any time. But there's also this acceptance that, hey, if something from the past is buried and forgotten, that's probably going to happen to me. All things are buried by time, and it's you can go in lots of different directions with it. But I think it just this feeling of ancient stories and things from the past is just explosive in how deep it can go in just a visceral level.
Yeah. Break out the history books, kid.
Yeah. How do you feel about this idea that stories can only prepare you for adventure to a certain extent? Do you like that? Do you push against that? Do you want to believe that you can prepare for anything by reading a book or watching a YouTube video?
I think it goes back to instinct. Sometimes you got to throw those playbooks out. I love the idea. I think it's on page 138. I get the notes here. They got Comac trying to figure some stuff out, and that's around trying to get knowledge from things from the past, and it's not really working. And Orla thinks, let's give instinct a try. And I think that's kind of where I come down on it. I think it's good to be prepared. Reith gets rewarded for it, but also you're out and about. So I love that. I love that there, and that's why I think it's important to study, but also important to go forward.
Yeah, I I think I would have kind of come to that myself just instinctively because I like to follow intuition, but I also like to make lots of notes about Star Wars books. Uh, but I always remember I had this back and forth over years between two different people in my life that I looked up to and thought a lot of when I was first starting improv. I was at this guy's house who had been doing improv, for years, and at that point it was like 4 years. Wow, because we were both quite young. But he had a book on improv, and I was just starting. And I was like, "Oh, can I borrow that?" And he's like, "Sure," but it's like reading about skiing. You can't really learn anything from it. You have to do improv. And that kind of lodged in my brain of like, "Oh yeah, there's some things you have to experience."
Yeah.
And then I related that story to another friend years and years later who I look up to, who is extremely well read and knows history extremely well. And he's like, "That's an awful statement. That's an attack on knowledge." And I thought, for myself, these two bits of wisdom from these two friends that I respect and look up to, is like, for me, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Like, yeah, you could learn a lot by reading about improv, and that is absolutely to be respected and valued. But you also will learn a lot by doing it.
Yeah, and then I think almost kind of keeping with the theme of this book, or part of the theme, one of the themes I connected to, of finding the right way for you, and that's why it's questioning, or at least diving into what you were taught or how you learned to do things, and finding the right way forward. I'm someone who needs to occasionally make some more notes, but if I adhere to it too much, my effectiveness as a communicator sometimes is gone, because I go by the heart, I go by instinct, and I got to find the right way. Where I've done some even podcasts with my girlfriend Grace, who is an actor, who break down to every word she says in a script, and needs to know those words in order to break it down a little more effectively, and that's her path. And so we have to find that way together. And I think that's part of what this book is doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One other theme, I guess, that struck me that we don't need to spend a ton of time on, but I wanted to bring up is bondage.
Mhm.
It's a weird thing to just shout out on a Star Wars podcast, bondage. But I was affected by how much that the story was about these idols that were binding something. I mean, it turns out the Drenger, who were bound, all of the flashbacks to Orla and Comac's adventure were all about these two literal captives. Affy's journey becomes about the realization that there are indentured servants, which is a sort of bondage. I even felt like what Comac was in Orla were wrestling with was feeling a little overly bound by the Jedi rules.
Mhm.
Did that affect you? How does that add to the book to you, if you agree that theme is there?
Um, I- so this is where I'll bring in the point we brought up earlier about Discovery's Dark Trials and them having to go back to the island. This is what is really the idea of, you talk about bondage and rules, and having to face things, and they were almost bonded to everything going on there. They couldn't escape it. So it was really effective that they all had to go back to the station. Then it felt like trying to break away from the things that bind you, and
Mm.
I really reacted to that. And as far as the Jedi, excuse me, as I flip pages, there's the idea of balance, and does the Jedi Order have you trapped? I think there's Comac's got some great stuff on how the Jedi, to divide the Force in two is almost kind of this act of violence, and how do we justify that act? And then, but later on, there was something I was moved by, it's okay to question the Jedi Order. It's just how you question it.
Mm.
Is something that I was really. You can disagree with the council; it just matters how you disagree. And I love kind of looking at that, and how when dealing with, you talk about the Jedi rules. I don't know if Orla might have been a little bit more trapped by it, whereas I think at the end of the book, Comac is not, but he's also questioning a lot of it, and so he's not in bondage to the Jedi rules. Where she might feel like, if I stay, I am. We all have to make our own choices, and I think that was there too. So yeah, it all gets really effective when everyone has to go back and face the things that kind of keep them bonded and tied up.
Yeah, yeah, either literally or metaphorically. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was really affected by that when I felt like, wow, that kind of image, that feeling keeps popping up to me. I think it's, in a way, that this book really expressing a vision of the dark side, that we're looking for new villains for our cool Jedi to fight, and that always means an idea. What is something that is truly feels wrong. And I think that feeling of being, held and contained, is something that feels unnatural and uncomfortable, and seeing that be uh, the thing that the Jedi are trying to resolve, both literally from rescuing captives or dealing with what was contained by the idols, and then, as you're pointing out so well, dealing with within themselves, what is holding me back, what is making me feel trapped. I need to make that go away. Is, I think, part of what made this book really feel like it's this trip into this utter darkness, and then for most of them out the other side.
Yeah, the long dark tea time of the soul. To bring in some more Douglas Adams titles.
Yeah. Any other big picture ideas that you wanted to discuss?
No, there is a lot about the balance that's interesting, and we could spend a lot of time on that. And I would love to even revisit this in other times, but just questions about bottling up the darkness, and do we really have to deal with anger? Do we have to overcome anger? Is one of the questions Comac's asking and Orla's asking, and real big stuff. The attachment stuff is always kind of a theme with the Jedi, but I think it flows nicely in some of the other things we've talked about.
Awesome. I think the only other thing for me is just really like that this book was its own book with its own ideas, but I feel like it really continued this big picture High Republic theme of sort of we are all the Republic in a different way. That's a real political statement. That's an ideology that Lena So is trying to get everybody to believe. But obviously, that's a big part of the Jedi belief that everything is connected, everything is a part of the Force. And I thought this one had that real specific, it's we, not me lesson in a couple ways. I think the point of the flashback of Orla and Comac being that these two leaders from these worlds that had been fighting forever were able to find a way to come together and realize how they can work together for the benefit of all. I thought Reith's Kyber Arch lesson, which kind of structures the book, is so about the we, not me, that really simple puzzle in a good way that his master gives him of no Jedi crosses the Kyber Arch alone. And he's like, what? It's super easy. It's basically just a thin branch. What's not a little branch, but it's a thin beam. What's the big deal? And really beautifully coming to that epiphany of like, we are all connected, which means nobody ever does anything alone.
Love that. I'm glad you brought that up. That was perfect connection to that.
Yeah. You know what? Let's take a quick break, and then we'll get into all of the moments that we enjoyed, action moments, canon moments, all that stuff. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, ForceCenter friends, make sure you're keeping up to date on all the great content from Jennifer Landa. Whether it's YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, you whippersnappers, ForceCenter's own Jennifer Landa continues to bring you fun, informative, and insightful laughs and moments.
Also, Jennifer brings her experience and perspective as a Star Wars-loving mother to her DIY projects, blogs, and more, so be sure to head on over to JennyLanda.com, that's JENILANDA.com, for articles like how to make your own Darth Maul sneakers or 10 unique Star Wars baby gift ideas.
Follow Jen on Twitter and Instagram at Jennifer Landa, and on TikTok as Jennifer Landa 1138.
And we are back to finish our discussion of Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. We talked about some of the big themes. Now we're going to talk about some moments we particularly enjoyed. We've already shared a lot in our journey through the themes, but I know I have a couple more fun, insightful moments that I enjoyed. How about you, Ken? What else do you got?
Yeah, same. It's funny. I was trying to think of moments. We'll get some of that, but also just more philosophies. I won't go too deep into them. Later on the book, page 349, great stuff about now, the late Master Jorah, talking about balance, but also says when you cannot achieve balance within yourself, simply lean toward the light and do your best. There's no point in reacting to a lack of calm in a way that makes you even less calm. And by the way, Claudia Gray handles Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and everything about them so well. I love her writing about that kind of stuff. And that's, again, I'm probably gonna put this out. I might put it. Can I get this tattooed? No, maybe it's too much. I'll paint it, put it on my wall. Really love that. Really took some solace in that quote.
That was the one that made me kind of just almost yell at the book of like, please tell me more, Master Jorah. I needed to hear that on the day I read that. I needed to hear that, because I think that there's something about this book with what Comac is going through in particular, and that quote of how do you, it's easy to say, okay, I should always, go to the light. I should always not give in to anger. But this permission to go like, some days you're not going to be able to do it all the way. So just do your best. And it doesn't feel like a cop out. It doesn't feel like, I got permission to be just a little bit of an asshole today. It is so much about that truth of like, you are unbalanced, but you need to keep moving forward. So just do whatever little thing you can to lean toward the light. No point in making yourself more upset by being mad at yourself about being upset.
Yeah. It just stood out. The Jedi philosophy, but also just in a book that's asking a lot of tough questions about balance. I still think this kind of came down on the side of the light being strong, and the light as a concept, not necessarily the light as an order, but something that's there, and it's always going to be there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, I think it's so great that it is a piece of wisdom that that Jedi are clinging to in a difficult time, because there's so much great stuff in this book and many other Star Wars books about like breathe, center yourself, and like that's such a great practical question of like, I might be about to die and I'm really scared and I just can't breathe and center myself right now. What should I do then? Right. And her basically saying like, just do your best. Don't get mad at yourself. I love it. Absolutely great stuff. What else do you have?
One particular moment here, going back to page 155. This is something I think pretty powerful for you and me. It's laughter as I won't say a weapon, but a laughter as a tool to battle the dark side. And this phrase here, that made everyone chuckle as Orla had intended. Good. Laughter made people relax and smile. It cast the dark side away and brought them closer to the light. I love it, not just from a wacky comedian standpoint, but I am a big fan of satire, but sincere satire, not a snarky cynicism, but just let's look at the world. And I think you can communicate with comedy. And I think laughter, you can get the shields down with laughter. And I think you can make bigger points with laughter, and it makes people think. And that's why, as much as I love silly comedy, I love random things in a Kids in the Hall sketch or a Monty Python sketch. I love rocks as a co-pilot in space, but I also love things with great meaning. And to see it all represented here with Jedi, who are notoriously serious and dour at times. There's a lot of comedy in these books, and Orla has a lot of moments of good humor and little wry comments. And I just loved it. That spoke to me as well.
Yeah, I love that she was aware of it. That was such a great quote, and I feel that way about comedy too. I think back in my own life, I've had the privilege of being around a lot of funny people, and the things that have made me laugh the most is when I really need a little bit of that pressure release, And I think that is in many ways the great goal of comedy. And we're in such a weird time for comedy because if you're in person with people and something weird or stressful is happening and somebody makes a joke and the target of the joke is to just poke fun at the situation, poke fun at yourselves, and relieve that immediate stress, that is so needed. And sometimes like social media is the opposite of that, of like, yeah, we don't need a million people making the same joke. We need that one person making that targeted joke in person. It's a weird balance with comedy.
It really is. It really is. But I love to see it in Star Wars.
Yeah. A couple from me. This is just like a fun flavor moment, which I think Claudia Gray is so good at, even when she's not quoting characters, but she's just in characters' heads. This is a quote from Jorah early on about pirates. None of them insulted her by even pulling a blaster.
Yeah.
And I love it. Jorah is like the really practical one. In Light of the Jedi, there's that conversation about, well, should the Jedi be proactive? And she's like, yes, that's what we're here for. Come on, let's go. Yeah. And that rang very true to me. I think I wrote this down because it was a very early Geo joke, but it was one that I think unlocked what we're doing here is you can only pronounce his name correctly if you don't have a mouth. Just that great circular comedy logic that lets you know what kind of ride you're in for. Loved it. Another one for me. These are more quotes than moments, but I think they reflect them. This is a Comac Vitus thought on page 72. Thank the Force for problems with simpler solutions. They allowed the illusion that the universe could be controlled, an illusion everyone needed from time to time. That was not breaking any new ground wisdom wise, but just it so painted a picture of this character who knew I'm wrestling with lots of things, and so when there's a simple problem that's just great, we can make that decision. It's something very comforting and empowering about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like, when I've got a lot of real problems during the day, but then I do just know what I want for dinner. Like, I solved that problem.
Yeah.
Last one for me, it goes to what our conversation at the top about the Drenger is how they are a little over the top, and that's what I love about them. I loved when they had poisoned, hypnotized Dez into just lashing out, and poor Reith had to fight him while also trying to save him. And the Drenjar yell, "Cut him with the blade that burns! Cook the meat for us!" So beautifully over the top. I love it. I love it. Any other moments that you wanted to highlight?
No. I'd just be repeating lessons on balance and comedy, but yes, many in the book.
Excellent. Was there anything in the book that you wrestled with that didn't work for you on a personal taste level?
I really want to have this answer. I think a lot of it was before. I really trust Claudia Gray as a storyteller. So knowing that some concepts, like I mentioned up top, Geode or the Drengir, like knowing that there's some concepts I might, let's see. I'm gonna kind of squint and see if you got this right. Not that I'm challenging a talented author like Claudia Gray. I have no business doing that, but it all kind of worked in the way it was handled. So for me, I'll focus on that and say no, nothing that really stood out. If anything, it's like sometimes you want to know, you're thirsty for more storytelling. This book does such a good job of just being in the center, in the dark, like we keep talking about. So the Nile, or a little bit more, like I can't wait for more storytelling. But that's not the book's fault. That's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I think same with me. I wrestled a little bit with the first half because there was a lot of threads, a lot of characters, a lot of ideas, and I think I got ahead of myself a little bit of like, okay, but what's the shape of this story? What kind of story is this? And like I said, that all went away because it just, I needed a little Jedi patience. It all locked into focus when they're like, we all got to go back to the station. I also just have this challenge every once in a while with Claudia Gray in that I love some of the characters so much that I'm just like, why are we leaving them ever? Master and Apprentice, we talked about that. I really, really love Master and Apprentice. It's up there with my very favorites of the books. But in the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon stuff is so great that, when we left them, sometimes I was like, I'm not disliking anything. I just want to be back with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. And I loved Reith to that depth. So it's not a critique. It's more a compliment of, for me, that's my reading experience of when I love a character so much. I'm like, could we just, what's Reith thinking about right now?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about action moments. The action is always part of Star Wars, whether it's a book or on screen. Well, almost always. Anyway, what were some fun action moments for you?
For me, two I want to highlight there. There's a lot of great moments and a lot of fighting, and Dez and Reith having their lightsaber fight that wasn't, that was painful and tension filled for different reasons than just the fight. A lot of things, and there was a lot of the tension comes from the anticipation of action. But when it all kind of broke out, I tell you what, I really loved Affy going on and fighting the Nile and bringing that thermal detonator and knowing that, oh crap, I brought this, I've never used one, but I'm gonna have to. And at one point, just kind of her, when her and Leox are escaping, or later, a little bit later in the battle, she sees what the damage actually was, and she acknowledged it. She sees it, and even like, did I do that type of thing? I really liked her taking it. I really like what she was doing. She's a great character, and that I was drawn to her part of the fight. A lot of great stuff with the character of Nan and Wreath facing off, but that was a great moment for me too. That one really stood out. And then one moment with Wreath force pushing the hyperspace pod, and Claudia Gray explains it in a level that is on par with her explaining what it takes to reform yourself as a Force ghost, which you got from a certain point of view book with Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
Spectacular. The details, it makes the Force just feel so vibrant and so different, and just growing up knowing, oh, you just do a Force push, or you press X on your controller, but to feel the weight of it, and going to why Yoda shrugged inside and with all that energy expelled after moving the X-wing. For Wreath to feel the metal and push, and there's actual weight to it, and man, that was a really good moment.
Yeah, I absolutely loved that moment in particular. For everything you're describing, I think the entire High Republic is doing a really great job of making sure that the Force and Jedi powers are not an X button on a video game, that you feel them, that the different characters perceive them. A Test of Courage had the great stuff about like just really going into Vernestra's head of like, yeah, we're luminous beings, but we are this crude matter too, and we got to push all this luminous through all this crude. And sometimes we feel the physical toll of it. And I thought that moment was great. I always thought it was great too because the Drengir are these great threat to the Jedi because they are very different. But then there are those moments where but the Jedi's great power is the Force. They're not just lightsabers. And I thought it was so great that Wreath took that step back of like, oh, I don't have to just hack and slash fight them. I can reach out to the Force and just sort of say, don't be here anymore. Bye.
Yeah.
I loved it from that perspective. The High Republic's also, for me, doing a great job of showing, to me, without breaking anything, that different Jedi explore different powers. So I loved Comac Vitus's like, can't fly, but I can levitate myself. And levitating yourself, it's not actually at tasking. It doesn't drain you that much, but people really pay attention to you when you just float into the air and yell.
Yeah.
Comac's float and yell, high up there for me. Couple others. I loved Wreath wrestling with the horror of truly feeling, using his lightsaber against an actual person and cutting an arm off. I love that he said it's such a bookish line instead of a badass line to say prosthetic arms are more advanced than prosthetic legs. So I'm gonna go for your arm. And I've long been. Sometimes I say it in a joking way, but I kind of mean it. A little bit of the Jedi morality and philosophy is often warning, limb, and then hopefully not head.
Yeah.
And this was just literally that of Wreath going, I'm asking you. Okay, I got to do the limb. And even with doing that poor Wreath was like the feeling, hearing the thump of the limb hitting the floor and really affected by it, that it's not casual. I'm really affected by the fact that this person gave me no other choice.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of great stuff. Again, there's a lot in this book. I could almost say you revisit of going back to the dark of bigger themes, so we don't have a 19-hour podcast. But him and Des have great conversations about Des saying, every couple of years or so, an apprentice gets into trouble for being too aggressive, and talks about how your response was proportionate to the risk to Nan. A lot of great stuff. The big things we always hear of Jedi not craving adventure and all that kind of stuff. They really go into the weeds so well with High Republic, like you said.
Yeah, and we've got that great follow up with Orla talking to the pirate who had their limb hacked off, and like, you were gonna kidnap that kid. You took that kid's choice away, and we tried to give you the choice to not make that choice.
Right.
And you wouldn't listen. So who made this choice? Like, there's some great, just like actually talking to the person that had their limb hacked off was great.
Yeah. Yep.
Two others for me. The Wookie baby rescue. Thought that was just great bit of action and great bit of Jedi helping other people. But that the fact that Wreath calls it Wookie baby, lovely. Wookie baby, please. And I could just feel that. I know you as a person who have owned animals that not that Wookiees are animals, but the panic of a young instinctual creature doesn't know that you're trying to help it and climbing and scratching you. And Uh, I loved the Wookiee biting Reese's Padawan braid off and having it sticking in its mouth. It's like a great, funny comedy beat. And there's a part of me is like, is that going to be his Jedi trial, or the Jedi going to be like, you lost your braid. The Wookiee baby is the will of the Force. You're a Jedi now.
I thought that too. And I love, great. Just like, I have to grow that again.
More stuff I gotta do. And the last big action moment for me, you just have to say it, is the face slam into Geode. It was just so effective.
Good old Geode.
When you realize that's what happening, being rescued by smashing face first into a rock is a beautiful thing. We're going to move on to some canon moments, connections to different ideas. I'll just run through some of them, and we can pick which ones we want to talk about. I just love this image of the silvery scaffolds on the Coruscant buildings. Another great little detail that they're doing in the High Republic, to be like, a lot of the stuff that you know from Star Wars is there, but it's not. It's still 200 years before, and this idea that some of the buildings are still under construction. It's great, just visual. There's a lot in this book that is the Claudia Gray, enjoying the Claudia Grayverse. You get the Port in a Storm drink and the Tonneray wine, which is quite good at Galaxy's Edge, the Tonneray. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about having things from an author's work pop up in new books by the author?
I think it's very fun. I think that she uses it pretty well. We got Galante again, right? Got to study Reese studies some of their meditation or something like that. I think when done in this kind of way, it's fun to have it be there for you if you see it.
Yeah, and it is a way to just sort of draw a connection, if you want to. I really liked when Reith was being kind of quizzed about what the Jedi were by Affy, the whole 2-sentence thing, but wondering if you should go into Jorah's whole speech about the difference between celibacy of the body and true purity of the heart.
Right.
That, to me, is a great line, but it's also just keeping in canon that this is a discussion among Jedi in this period in particular, of how do you make that differentiation between it's fine to explore a little bit, but the attachment is the problem.
Yeah, it doesn't one of the chapters actually end with like, so like, what, do you have sex or not? Like,
yeah, it's this one, and he's like, should I go into the whole speech? Love it. Yeah. A Maxine Warrior Station. Obviously, I wrote it down because I didn't realize it was going to be, the book when we first got there. And of course, that connection that it is the one from the Rise of Kylo Ren comic book. But I also thought it was an interesting bit of canon that ultimately what the station was from the Maxine Warriors perspective was a way to scout ahead and reach far places of the galaxy. So it kind of connected them to what the Nile is doing with the paths.
Right. Very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it tied all these villain goals to our heroes' goals, which is to reach out to the rest of the galaxy. Our heroes want to reach out to hopefully bring people together. And the villains are like, well, what can I take?
Yep. But all at the same intersection there.
Yeah. Scrolling down here. So the different kind of Force artifacts on page 187, listing the three, the kind that can contain memories or personalities of Force users, kinds that can enhance Force connection, and kinds that can hinder or confound the Force. Did you like hearing about the kind of the specificity of that from, a Jedi like Comac?
Yeah, because he's sorry, recording my phone. I'm getting text, people. I'm sorry.
You're a popular guy, Ken Namsock.
Pest spray coming. I like everything about it. I don't think of what's the comic with the Mask of Moment. Is that that's the Vader one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like all of the connections there. I apologize. That text distracted me, Joseph. I'm so sorry.
I understand. Just do your best to lean into the light.
There you go. I'm trying to. I like Comac. He's nice.
Let me let you deal with your text if you need to, and I will ramble to both you and the listeners about this.
We're good now. We're good. We're totally good now there. So I'm going to put on a Sith mask and connect to the darkness.
Nice. I think part of the reason I wanted to write this down and talk about it a little bit is I really love the Force lore stuff. I think they're doing such a good job in the High Republic era of having a little bit more definition to the way certain Force things can be, while still always reinforcing with the characters that, like, well, we're aware of this, but it's the Force, so there could be other things we don't know about. So it's not getting down to that point of like, here is the list, here are the ways that the Force can be found in artifacts, period, and that's it. This is presented so well of like, it can contain memories or personalities. It's not a science. They can kind of enhance Force connection. That goes all the way back to Splinter the Mind's Eye.
Yeah.
So that was fun to see canon that's going kind of all the way back to the original EU. And then the hinder or confound the Force was great to hear about, because of like, I've never been a fan of the Yel Samari, or however they choose to say the Force bubble. But I like the idea, because I think all natural things are a part of the Force. I love that. But I like the idea of something that can hinder or confound the Force. That to me made me think of like, are there devices that make you just way too unfocused to center yourself, or it connects a little bit to the end of Light of the Jedi, where there is a realization that the best way to torture a Jedi is to surround them with other people's pain. Is there a device like that?
I love that idea, because it's not a tool. It's not an X button that you're pressing or anything like that. It is something real. It's something emotional, and I love that idea.
Yeah, and it doesn't negate the Force; it frustrates it. That's great, because that's a thing that happens in nature.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, the big part of the story about the Force bind of the idols, and then we eventually learn that this was performed by the Sith against the Drenger. So, two questions here, Ken. The Force binding of the idols and the way it's described, that's really very much like, to me, like the Jedi cast a spell, they do some sorcery. It's not described that way, but in comparing it to other kind of pop culture, it isn't like, levitation or a specific ability. It's like recharging the energy of the Force itself, and that it's not even visual, but they're trying to see it in a visual way so they can even understand what they're doing. How did you feel about that? Was that too spell-like for you?
No, because it opens up the idea of very different ways to use the Force, and was there things used in the past that aren't used now, and why? Or do you want to question why? Or maybe there's a good reason why? And I love kind of as it's tied. We talk about a lot of history in this book, tied to we got thousands of years of Jedi history. I love that idea. There might have been things a little different.
Yeah, and in particular interacting with these idols, and I love the way it was described. I don't mind it being, for myself, a little. I don't want it to be like, we have learned these magic words, except for the Night Sisters. That's fine with me, because that's kind of their thing. But I liked that everything is possible through the Force, and sometimes it means literally lifting a physical object, and sometimes it means changing the actual energy that surrounds something.
Yeah.
I loved hearing about the Sith shrine under the Jedi temple. That is, of course, places in canon. I believe Tarkin has a great little scene with Palpatine in there.
I think that's essentially like the first era in the modern canon at least, that we really get to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was reading up when the Clone Wars season 7 was coming out. I think it's one of the great lost arcs that they were going to deal with that a little bit more directly in the Clone Wars. So it's obviously clearly an idea that's, been a part of, Lucas era Star Wars. It's really at the heart, I think, of Jedi and Sith philosophy and Star Wars philosophy. So it was really cool to see how that definitely some of the Jedi are absolutely aware of it and they use it.
Yeah.
Love that. I also liked just that little bit of info about the past of during the Sith Empire, Sith and Jedi fought for control around virginses. I keep hoping and thinking that would be a good story to tell, on that, you're looking for a story that's real big on the screen, Jedi Sith Wars, Sith Empire fighting over control of the tree on Dagobah. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
I love the idea of a Sith Empire and not to rehash those kind of a rebellion against the Empire, but yeah, that'd be interesting with the Jedi and the underdogs and that kind of situation versus what we're dealing with now in the High Republic in the prequel era. That'd be great.
Yeah. I loved that we had a Lerman Jedi. Gik-Tu Nelmo was down in the Sith Shrine.
Yep.
I love those cranky Lerman from the Clone Wars, so it's great to see one as a Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Affy eats some Baja ice treats at what sounds like Dex's Diner. How'd you feel about that?
I even reread it again just to be like, does Dex show up? No, maybe he bought this. I don't know how old Dex is. I was going to look that up, but I didn't. Loved it. Little callback, and you and I are pretty fond of Dex in his diner, so this is a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, and for me, it was it is a little cheeky, but in a good way. Of I think Claudia Gray responding to the fact that it was two 50s diner for some people. I think had a good tongue in cheek in the way it was written. Like odd place, red vinyl seats. This one line opened up, I think, a good line of discussion that we can have a longer discussion about sometime. But Comac, when they were hiring the vessel to take them back, was saying, I can cover it with my personal stipend. Now, how'd you take that? Does Comac have a job on the side? Is he teaching yoga somewhere? Or did you take that as Jedi have personal stipends?
Look, Mr. Bond, here's your credit card. You got a reservation. It's very logistical, non-adventure things, but it's taken care of. I think there's some good conversations to be had about where the Jedi get their money. I think it's kind of it's sometimes it's super realistic. I don't worry about it as much, but I also wonder. So I loved hearing that. I got a Jedi card. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I've been saving up my my personal stipend. Yeah, I both look forward to and dread the book Finances of the Jedi that finally really digs into exactly how and where their money comes from. But it was fun to hear that just acknowledgement of it. I like noting all the different terms for bathrooms that pop up in Star Wars. This was an evac book, not a refresher book. Fun, good to know. Fun. One other fun detail. The Jedi never have a reason to duel. I really liked reinforcing that. But they all like the training class. It's the cool one.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Fight.
And then the last two for me, great moment of having Orla slow a blaster bolt. That was great to connect that back to. She didn't stop it all the way like Kylo Ren, but she did slow it.
Slow it down, yeah.
Yeah. Finally, the Brush Vow, which is also from the Vader comic. That was cool to see. That's how Dez was going to find his way forward, is by taking a long break and meditating on what he'd done and what he'd become.
Yeah, curious about that. Curious to see if we ever hear from Dez again or see what he learns in that Brash Vow.
Yeah, I just really like that this Brash Vow has become this clear canon thing, because it is fun to debate and interpret all the wonderful Jedi we know from the Skywalker saga era, how much they perceived that is a little bit what they were doing, is taking a break to recenter. So I'm sure there are many other little canon details. I don't write down every recognizable species and all that. But there's just so much connective tissue that's fun to celebrate. Let's talk, like you just were, about the hopes for the future of these characters. Which characters are you most interested in following? We got Reith in Comac now being Master in Padawan. They're going to have some frontier adventures. Orla's going off way seeking, which we haven't even really talked about the way seeking. Then we got, the shipping adventures of Leox, Geode, and Affy. Scoville binds prison time. Nan's Nihil ascendancy. There's so many threads to pick up on. What are you excited about?
There's a lot. We spent a lot of time on Geode for what he means, but Leox, Geode, and Affy. Affy's a great character, and Affy, what she has to deal with loss of real parents, but then this found family. There's something big in Star Wars, and her found mother is the one that might have been responsible in some darkness there. And I think Affy's. I loved her in the fight. I love what she learned. I love what she represented. Kind of looking at the Jedi, these weird space wizards, and she's been changed, and she's now the captain of the vessel. And I think you could spin that off any way you want. Comic series, anything. Geode's a star, but I think Affy is a leader, and I really want to see where they can take her. Nan's Nihil ascendancy is interesting. I want to see her show back up, and maybe if one thing, the book just cut it. We didn't have time. The book didn't have time to follow that thread too much past the big revelation. I felt, and I want to see more of her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nan can be a great way to continue to humanize the Nile, to see them from a different perspective. And if she pops up in other stories, is this person who would just truly join them because, hey, everything else is awful, and they're giving me a path forward. They give my family a path forward. I believe in them. I hate these Jedi, but now she's ascended to this higher level, possibly because she provided this great information. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Totally with you on Affy. I think we didn't discuss it a ton, but I do really like the story that she is wrestling with her parents, but in particular, that she's also this somebody who is not sure what to make of the Jedi and the Republic. And I like
Yeah.
that she has such a success story of she passes through her dark trial and she turns her adoptive mother in. And it has that bit of nihilism of like, yeah, but the Republic's probably not going to do anything. And then holy crap, within like seconds,
Yeah.
she's arrested. They're sorting things out, and it's subtle, but it's another great picture of when we say this is the High Republic. That means things like justice are moving fast. They're not being ground to a stop like they are in the Phantom Menace.
Great connection, great way to look at it. I love that talk on it. Yeah, no, pretty much again, her just seeing the way she's seen the world. She's an entry point character in a lot of ways. For us in the story, looking around, seeing the Jedi and all that kind of stuff. But it really love where that ended, and Leox just kind of being even when he wrestles with calling her little bit isn't a nickname that really applies, and not in, but it is. He's such a warm-hearted, good-hearted character. So yeah, I really love that idea. Seeing where they go.
Yeah. I of course want more with Reith and Comac. I since they are on Starlight Beacon, they're in the Frontier. I would assume they're going to pop up again. That has been, I think, for me, the most interesting, one of the most interesting parts of the High Republic, of not knowing that, oh, Claudia Gray is writing the Reith series and Reith Part 2 will be out next, like of just kind of not knowing where these characters will pop up again and who's going to write them, and will they be a main character again, or will they just be a background character? That stuff is really interesting to be in the unknown. Final thing for me is we didn't get a chance to talk a ton about the Wayseeker idea, but I love that, of this idea of you can go to the Jedi Council and say, I don't want to leave the Order, but I really need some time to pursue the Force just for me and do the mission that I need to do. I love that one of the examples was, I feel really compelled to this conflict on this planet, and I really want to help these people who are being oppressed. That's what I want to do. And I love that feeling of Orla being like, I got a ship. I'm going to go follow my intuition. I'm going to find out who I need to be. And there's a part of me that just wants this really, really fast one person story about what Orla does on her adventure.
One off.
So the other thing that I want to talk about what might be coming next out of this story is there was this great implication in the 25 years ago flashback that implied the Hutts want to control the territory that now includes the Starlight Beacon by those two planets that were fighting. Are you intrigued by that? Do you want to see the Hutts rise?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I read that. I was like, well, we got an adventure there. We got a story, and the High Republic's got a ways to go. And there's got to be some other things that rise up to face the Jedi. Not that the Nile and the Drungir aren't enough. Drungir or the Drungis. And the Hutts rising to some sort of power is pretty intriguing to me. We'll see if they deal with that. I was intrigued by that.
Yeah, I keep looking for not a explain it all, tie it all together, but I'm really intrigued by the moments in the High Republic that might tie directly to the fall of the Jedi era, the prequel era, and that it seems to me like maybe there is a desire to wrestle with this question of like, why do the Republic so accept, like, yeah, Tatooine, that's Hutt space. Yeah, the Hutts do what they want, including slavery. Like,
right.
Are they going to really, is it going to be that the Jedi have suffered through the Nile and the Drengir, that, or, you know, a lot of what they did out here in the Outer Rim has good intentions, but unwanted consequences that kind of shame them back and make them pull back. And in that vacuum where the Jedi aren't willing to be in the Outer Rim, or the Republic isn't willing to be on the Outer Rim, that's what allows the Hutts to take over.
Yeah. Ooh. It's for you to connect to some stuff going on with Phantom Menace is a real smart play. Why it's not just me throwaway, that they could really deal with that thematically.
Yeah, and it could be. I love the way it's phrased. Of like, when we'll, now that we've manipulated all these situations to get rid of this other competing crime organization, we'll move in. You know, and we'll see how many years it takes. So it really made me left me feeling like this is maybe a threat that is going to be in this High Republic story, or maybe it's just going to be kind of a little button in the background. All right. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you wanted to touch on in this great book? Because obviously we could do hours and hours on this book.
No, and I look diving into Nan's story with Heg. There's another thing of questioning your teachers and mentors, but maybe kind of going, yeah, no, I agree. And we'll see where that goes. This book typical with a good Claudia Gray story, just raises some tough questions, raises some great philosophical debates about Jedi, and which is what the High Republic era keeps doing. So really love this adventure. Really love what was this was putting out there, and also pretty darn funny.
Yeah, it's a funny book, a deep book, a great adventure book, a great development of the High Republic book, all those things. And I'm sure that we will touch on moments from this book. I sense that this is the kind of book where it has specific ideas that are really going to latch onto our brains, Ken. And I'm sure they will be coming up in future episodes. And obviously, there'll be ramifications, I would imagine, in the rest of the High Republic. I think for me, my sort of final statement on this book is, obviously, we broke down some of the big themes. We broke down some of the canon connections and the characters we loved. And I think that we can be like Reith. I can be like Reith, and I can write an essay about this book. But I also love that this book felt very intuitive. I just felt this book. I felt the mood of it. I felt this truth that we all have dark things that we need to wrestle with, and that's okay. And we can find a way to wrestle through the darkness. I felt that, and I love, and I'm really trying to remember. We get to have so much time talking about stories, talking about Star Wars, that we can think about stories, but we can also just feel stories. And I loved feeling this story.
Right there with you. I think I watched Star Wars so heart first, and this spoke to me on that level. And again, you're so right to highlight when they got to go back to the island. That's where some real big themes locked in, and love that.
Yeah. So let's have a fun question to wrap up. Ken, would you rather be friends with a sentient rock or a sentient plant?
This is funny because so Grace is a definite green thumb. We got a lot of plants in the house, and I love plants. I love them growing. I love Ents and Lord of the Rings. They're not actually trees, but I love the forest as life. I'm there for all of that. But I got to tell you, I got to hang out with Geode. I'll go with a rock.
Yeah, I'm gonna cheat on this one. I'm gonna try to find balance. I think rock is comfort, and a plant is adventure. So I want to be friends with a rock like Geode, but come to recognize that a plant is growing inside them, and those little weeds are starting to pop out.
Love it.
Ken, would you like to tell people where they can find us?
Would love to. You can find us on Twitter at ForceCenter Pod. We're on Instagram and YouTube as well. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast. We're available on Anchor, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and now Amazon Music and Spotify. Merch is available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/ForceCenter. You can support us directly there. You can follow me at Cadnapsuck, or go to my website, cadnapsuck.com, or to the new spot I'm working on, the GPA.fun.
Excellent. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Joseph Scrimshaw, and you can check out my website, josephscrimshaw.com, for all my other comedy adventures, comedy albums, my other podcast, Obsessed, where my wife and I had a great discussion about WandaVision. If you're interested in that, go check that out. But for now, for myself, for Ken, for Geode, at least I think, this has been ForceCenter.